Hello there! Welcome back to Charles Circle, and welcome back to Captain of Industry. Last time, we upgraded our space station to be able to host a crew in orbit. And we built our last new basic industry, the titanium industry. Today, we're going to use that titanium to upgrade our space station even further and unlock space research points. So, what does this next step in the space research or in the space program look like? Well, as we said, we're going to have to upgrade to Space Station 3. Partly, it's just the next thing to do, but also, partly, we're kind of blocked from researching any further in the tree, whether we're talking about stuff explicitly for the space program or not, until we can start layering in these space research points. So it's definitely time to do that. So what do we need to upgrade this space station to Space Station 3, where it will be able to create these space research points? Well, we're going to have to provide, one time, 120 of these yellow version of station parts. We currently produce the basic white version of station parts. So we'll have to produce those to upgrade, and then, of course, we will have to supply them to maintain the station. It will also, I guess, double our current crew and crew supply requirements. It'll give us a minor increase to our Unity and Research bonuses, but most importantly, it will allow us to convert these electronics 4 into space research points. Okay, so we're going to have to create these station parts, and we're going to have to create electronics 4. That's the to-do list, so let's get after it. I've already researched all the techs that we're going to need for today. Electronics 4, the solar panels upgraded version that'll go into these station parts, and of course the technology for producing those station parts. And you might have actually noticed, while I was researching, I did make a couple optimizations, changes, tweaks to reinforce our various productions. Give you a quick overview just so that you're fully up to speed. I doubled our power production up here in the northeast. This is now 240 megawatts. I just added another pair of turbines and another set of boilers up here. Gave us a bit more power to work with, which is good. It's the first thing we run out of every single one of these episodes, so I'm happy to be starting one with a little bit of headroom. I also, in order to improve our electronics production generally, and you can see it worked quite well, these are 2 very full buffers, I added a little bit of supplemental glass production out this way, right? So you may remember from the original design that we had a little bit of local glass production, but it wasn't quite enough to continuously supply, and so we had to have this supplemental glass drop-off. Now, it wasn't enough to continuously supply the original version of this, and then we upgraded it all the way up to Assembly 5s, which has meant that we were really going through a lot more glass than we produced out here, and we were bringing them all over on these small little trucks, 78 at a time, which sounds like a lot, but really isn't at this stage in the game. So I tripled the glass production that we do out here because we already had the stuff for it. Why not? It's already all in the area. And actually flipped this so that this is now an excess glass for any overflow that we produce that can then be supplied out to the rest of the base. I also rearranged, although this is the same capacity, the glass that we were producing out here, moved it over to make more room for more copper, because copper is the thing that we were definitely most hurting for. And our original setup here was 4 blast furnace 2s, which I was basically continuously boosting, and was only keeping up with the need for our electronics over here. So we were not actually making any surplus copper, even though we were fully boosted. So making use of that extra space now, I've added a whole bunch of arc furnaces. Again, these can't be boosted, so these 8, I guess, really only replicate that original blast furnace 4 boosted blast furnace setups. But then I added an extra one here, managed to squeeze in an extra little row, which is great. And of course, there's twice as many of each of the supporting pieces of equipment. The nice thing about this, though, is that it's not costing us, like 3 Unity continuously. And you can see that that has had a huge impact on the amount of Unity we're generating. I am currently boosting, as far as these industries go, just our concrete, because I'm paving everything everywhere, as you can probably appreciate. That's also true because I added a bit more steel capacity over here. These are still blast furnaces because I do still want to be able to toggle the boosting of at least this chunk of industry. But I also added about 50% more capacity out here as well. And so our overall steel capacity has been increased a pretty decent amount. And the ceiling of that production, if we boost all of this, is even higher. We are also producing out here the oxygen for both of these little factories from a massive set of electrolyzers, which is neat because we're producing byproduct hydrogen over here at a pretty high volume, which we really appreciate because we get to use that around the rest of the base. I've also set up one of those modules over here, although it's paused. This is something we can turn on or off as we need. It's on the lowest priority for power anyway, so even if it's on but we don't have the power, it turns off. Same thing if we run out of people. Not that that's an issue right now. And I added one more of those out here and converted this entire set of boilers to run on hydrogen. The fuel gas was still intermittent and just a little frustrating to operate with, and we had all this extra hydrogen. So I thought, why don't we just turn that fuel gas into more hydrogen right here? We have the steam, obviously, to run that. From this set of boilers, I added a third. And now all of these, they don't even run on this coal power anymore. They run off of hydrogen, which we backfill over here with this setup, or simply allow excess hydrogen, which has become a thing that we have to deal with in this base, which is cool. Excess hydrogen comes out here, so we can toggle this on or off as we need as well. So that's pretty good for fuel, electricity, basic production, etc. So we should be in a good spot where we don't need to sit around and wait for anything to charge up. I've also made sure that we're full up on all of our construction parts. I managed to even create a large basic electronics storage because that's a thing that we dip every once in a while. Yeah, so we're in a very good spot here, I think, and we're ready to dive into it, which is great. Okay, so let's talk about those station parts. So normally, when we now have to produce the upgraded version of a particular item in this game, right? We go from, well, we have basic construction parts, now we need to go from the white to the yellow version, construction parts 2. How do we do that? Well, we take that basic input, we add something, and then that turns into the next level part. Same thing happens here. We add steel and it becomes 3. Same here. We add electronics 2, it becomes a 4. So you might think, all right, well, these parts, we're going to have to add some advanced piece. Maybe it'll be electronics 3 or even 4, and we'll get station parts, right? Nope, that's not quite it. So how this works, and you can see these two recipes look very similar, right? How this works is we need a yellow core instead of a white core. We need still the same chemical fuel, and we need an upgraded version of the solar cell. And you'll also appreciate that the throughput is lower here. And not that it matters, it's obligatory, it has to be in an assembly 5. That's what we're using everywhere, so it doesn't really matter, but in case you're ever stuck trying to figure out why you don't have the option, that's probably it. Okay. Well, that means this pile that we have of these that's left over is actually kind of a waste. But the trade-off is we can actually just reuse the same manufacturing lines and adjust our inputs. This can simply become this recipe now, right? I'll leave them both just for comparison. And we no longer need electronics 2, we just need to swap out this input for electronics 3. We no longer need steel, we just need to swap out titanium. We need composite panels still, but they're still here. So in some ways, this is actually a simpler change to make. Same thing here, still need the same chemical fuel input. We'll change our solar cell recipe, and then it'll be the same core input that comes in from over here. All right, well, what does that solar cell recipe look like? Similar parallels, right? We use aluminum instead of steel. Okay, no problem. We use wafers instead of silicon poly. Okay, so it's one extra processing step, but this is the basic input into the microchip process. Fortunately, we don't have to do any of that circular cycling stuff. This is before all of that. So it's one machine that takes this and makes it slightly more processed, fine. And there's our glass. Okay. Same thing also, by the way, we can use these, I believe, in excess to add a bit of solar panel power as we started messing around with up here. Not that it's made much of a difference, but you know, we've got the extra, I suppose. Maybe the upgraded version will be better. Let's see. Okay, so I think the only other thing I will say is we probably need to reinforce our composite panel production. We added this buffer here because, well, it's kind of spiky consumption. These rockets, I mean, they take 300, right? Every time it's time to make a new rocket, that basically drains 75% of this storage. If it was full, now it's very much not. And so because our rocket firing frequency is increasing, we're actually going to go through these panels a little bit faster. So we might add a second machine here. But I think, you know, other than that, it's pretty straightforward. We'll still use electronics 2, right, to create rockets. So we'll just need to add an electronics 3 input, hook it up here, swap this out. Titanium we'll bring over in for the steel, and so on and so forth all the way through. So we'll have a couple extra storages here. And a few of these are, you know, we can remove. We'll swap this out. I don't know what we're going to do with these extra station parts. There's really nothing. I guess they'll just sit in a box in a corner somewhere. But yeah, that's all we really need to do. So I'm going to dive on in here and get it all set up. All right, so here we are. This is it. Retooled a little bit, but pretty much the same thing as we talked through. So we still have to provide, right, composite panels, steel, and electronics 2, so we can keep making rockets. No problem. We snake that through here, here, and we have doubled the production of composite panels. As we discussed, I think we just need that throughput here so that we can bounce back from draining 300 every time we need to make a new rocket. Of course, we still make our chem plant 2's worth of chemical fuel. That should still be sufficient. We mix it over here with the composite cores that come from this assembly. Again, using composite panels, the titanium alloy, which we're snaking through here, and some electronics 3. Great. This makes the cores. Cores go to parts. Last thing we didn't touch on is the solar cell, the upgraded solar cell. And it's here. It takes aluminum, it takes silicon wafers, it takes glass. We're bringing the wafers, by the way, in from over here, where we have this excess production that we use as a buffer here at the beginning of our microchips input to this little factory. If we need to, we can certainly add more crystallizers here, but the fact that the buffer has already bounced back to about a third already probably means we're fine. So we'll leave that be for now, but we'll keep an eye on it, of course. All right, so we are starting to crank out these yellow station parts. And the only other piece that's worth mentioning here is the one thing that we can actually recycle, not the basic station parts, not the basic composite cores, but we can recycle the solar cells. And so we'll turn these into recycling real quick. And at that point, eventually, I think we will start to have some excess solar cells, which we will then, like these upgraded solar cells, which we'll then store similarly in one of these. But let's at least get something back for these, right? In the meanwhile. So there it goes. All right, well, so what are we using these for? Obviously, we are using them to upgrade the space station. So let's supply them so that they can go into a rocket. I think we're going to probably play around with the actual inputs here eventually, but we do still need to be able to supply these at least for another second or so for maintenance. Although once we get the yellow station parts up here, they'll serve that purpose. But until then, we might as well get some use out of these. As mentioned, they are otherwise useless. So quickly get these loaded up. And there we go. Now, eventually, we'll need to get this Electronics 4 also produced and sent up. Because this is going to take a few rocket launches, right? We said a rocket has a capacity of like 40, and the upgrade will take 120, so that's going to be 3 full rockets. We have a little bit of time to talk about and ideally set up Electronics 4. So let's do that. Electronics 4. This is back to our typical structure of, well, we take the lower tier good, we add a couple things, and now we have the higher tier good. Okay, so we'll need to start with some Electronics 3. But what are these two things? Lenses and diamonds. Let's start with diamonds. They're actually pretty straightforward. It gets its own building, the Diamond Reactor, where we mix graphite. Great, no problem. We've had to start making some supplemental graphite, but this is is nothing, obviously, in the grand scheme of our base's graphite production. I don't even think we'll have to add a building for it, but if we do, we will. And salt, same thing. Lots of it lying around, tons of it. Okay, great, so that makes diamonds. What about this lens? Well, lens, it takes ethanol. Okay, great. We make that at our farm, actually, and then we import it to downtown, or to the food area at least. It takes diamond paste. Well, what is that? It's diamonds plus either cooking oil or heavy oil. Now we consume most of our heavy oil, well, we crack all of our heavy oil very intentionally. We don't use it elsewhere in the base. We are monitoring this to make sure that this stays at 0. If it doesn't, something's gone wrong with our refinery. However, cooking oil, we make a pretty good amount of. We use it over here to make, for example, cake. And I believe also corn chips. Yep. And because sometimes I plan ahead, I've been saving our excess in an accessible export location. So we'll use cooking oil to make our diamond paste. The good news is that's a ton of it off of very little extra material. Last thing we'll need to do is create whatever this sapphire wafer is, and then we can mix these 3 together in a lens polisher, another building that we're getting for the first time. Oh wow, that's very straightforward. It's a crystallizer. This is what we use to make our silicon wafers, and it just uses aluminum. Okay, so we'll have to siphon this off of our aluminum production somehow. We'll go keep an eye on, or we'll go figure out how to make that happen. But that's pretty straightforward as well. 1 in, 1 out. Okay. So, where should we make these things? Well, Electronics 4 is only going to be consumed in this area. We don't actually have to use it, right, to make the next level of research lab parts or whatever, like we did with everything else electronics-wise before this. We indirectly do that because we simply supply it to the space station. You can think about the space station as a lab in the sense that it produces space research points, but we just hook it up into orbit, and that's good enough. And we do also use it, once we unlock it, for these next 2 pieces of the space program. The probe parts, or we'll mix with, okay, composite cores, we already make. Plutonium, interesting. That's a byproduct we use and recycle fuel-wise in our nuclear power plant. Okay. And then we can also mix it with titanium and, interesting, again, enriched uranium for the compact reactor. Okay. But the point here is these are both space program goods. So I think we should probably do the final assembly of these electronics 4 here in this spaceport area. Great. No problem. We can do that. Where should we make our lenses? Well, the sapphire wafer, I suppose we might as well make, if we could, somewhere here by the aluminum factory. Now, where is the alumina step in this process? Okay, it's here, coming out of these kilns. And it represents, if we were to make this continually, which we don't need to do, because we don't need that much, it represents a quarter or a third of one of these, and one of these is a quarter of our production. It's not a lot, right? Okay, so we'll probably just put like a little bit of a balancer here and send some overflow out here somewhere. We could even try to squeeze this in. But I think the point is, we probably just do this here, right? And then we export the sapphire wafer. It's not like one or the other has a better or worse like transport setup. It doesn't get much smaller or much larger once we produce it. So we'll do that over there, and then we will mix it, right, with this diamond paste and ethanol. Now, if I think about these pieces, where should we make these? Well, the diamonds and the paste kind of should go together, right? Because diamond paste requires diamonds. And that ethanol's right nearby, frankly, right? So maybe what we should do is go up here. And so, for example, we make a ton of graphite here, and we definitely will. There's a reason this is a large storage, because we have 16 coal boilers working 24/7, and this very busy exhaust scrubber, who literally down to the exact single bit of exhaust barely can handle all of this, right? Okay, so we're producing graphite here, probably more than anywhere else. We could make our diamonds here, because salt is the other required input. And hey, wouldn't you know it, we make a ton of it here because, oh my gosh, how much seawater are we constantly flushing back here? So I actually think this is probably where we do our diamond production. Now we might need a few of these because 2 is not very much. And these are not boostable, I don't think. So then we need to take some of those extra diamonds, and we need to turn them into paste. I think what we would probably do there is mix them up with this cooking oil, as we said, and then that paste plus some ethanol, right, plus the sapphire wafer turns into our lens. And then our lens is the smallest, most compact final outcome from all of these little productions. So we'll still have to send over some diamonds, right? So diamonds and lenses need to go over to the spaceport so that we can turn them into electronics 4. But I think that's it. I think that makes sense. We'll want diamonds also in bulk over there eventually anyway. So I think what we'll do is we'll probably set up a pretty robust production over here of diamonds. Say diamonds here, paste also nearby, one of these 2 locations, and we'll turn into lenses. And then we'll ship over diamonds and lenses from here to here. And we'll have to send silicon wafers along the way as well. So I'm going to do that while we continue to send up our rockets. In fact, I suppose we probably need to change the priority here so that we're sending up the right things to get the upgrade. But yeah, this should go pretty quickly. There's a world where we need to add a second rocket assembly depot, but we'll cross that bridge when we are convinced that we have come to it. All right, I'll be right back with some electronics for component production. Talk soon. Okay, so here's diamonds and lenses. Sort of an awkward thing to squeeze in here, but pleased with how it managed to fit in around stuff. So starting with the diamonds, right? We have graphite. Definitely the weirdest thing we had to do was sit it over here and run things all the way around, but I wanted to preserve this throughway in case we need to, for example, supplement this salt ever. We'll see. But the graphite comes in along here, is one of the inputs, the flat on the bottom, and the other is the salt here on the U-shaped up a level. Okay, that spits out just a bunch of diamonds, hopefully, and those diamonds follow all the way along here under the bridge, under the ramp, and then they hit a splitter so that we can prioritize them out to the diamond paste production. But any excess is here for export. Okay, the diamond paste also requires the cooking oil, which is right here in quite some volumes. And then that diamond paste is mixed with the sapphire wafers that we're going to have to import here, and the ethanol coming along this pipe here and splitting out along this way. Whoops, I want this to go under the ramp. I'll take care of that in a moment. But then that should be everything. Now we'll have to bring in the sapphire wafers, so we'll need to go do that at the aluminum plant next. I'm going to quickly fix this pipe and then I'll insta-build everything and we'll be off. We have the Unity. Goodness, expensive, but we have the stuff. Let's see if the power holds. I will say that the power definitely spikes whenever our titanium or our aluminum plants kick into high gear. So we'll see. It's mostly fine, but it'll get spiky. That's why we have the hydrogen being produced on lowest priority. Okay. Now here, this should be relatively straightforward as well. We just want to grab a little bit of excess alumina. And here we go. I've taken a little bit off the sides here. We'll prioritize the original outputs out to the aluminum production, but any overflow, I think there will be a decent amount, comes out here and is consumed by the crystallizer, turned into sapphire wafer. Rerouted the slag slightly to make it fit. Not a big deal. So I think we'll let that run for a minute. How's all this going? Now we have graphite. Here comes the graphite. Graphite plus sand hopefully equals diamonds. And here they go. Decent amount of power themselves, frankly. And here they come. Buckets of diamonds, I suppose. They're running along here to probably make, yep, the beginnings of our paste. And out that rolls. barrels of paste, I suppose. Cool. Well, this line should start to fill up, and it won't be able to do anything here until we also have sapphire wafers, so let's go back and check on that. It looks like we have some starting here. Love that shade of blue. Very cool. I think we might even, just to get things started, prioritize it out here first. We certainly have a buffer of aluminum and plenty going on over here as well. Meanwhile, this is done. Let's go clear this all out.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lift off.
And we can turn this into solar cell mono. So there's that. Now we have some excess. How is our upgrade faring? Oh my, this might very well be, well, if we have enough. I think we do. I think this is it. I think this will be our launch. Final rocket.
Five, 3, 2, 1, lift off.
All right, a little while later, we have a pretty decent production of sapphire wafers, which is great because that means we must have a pretty decent production of lenses, and we do. So here we are. Lenses and diamonds are 2 of the 3 things that we need for electronics 4, the third being electronics 3. All right, so this is working well so far. I will say, especially because we have to juggle multiple types now of goods to send up, including people. Only one rocket, even if it's a small amount, can only carry like 1 item per trip. So I do think we're getting to the point where we're maybe going to need to think about a second rocket assembly depot, just so that we can launch more frequently. So we'll probably have to set that up here in relatively short order. But we can do electronics 4 first. So let's do that. Now, how many are we actually going to need? Initially, the space station will only consume 2 per minute, right? And this will give us the throughput for 6. Okay, great. I think 1 assembly will probably be sufficient then for our purposes for now. Not the tidiest, most fancy production that the world's ever seen, but I think it'll do for now, just for proof of principle. Let's get them up and running. All right, and a little while later, here we are. We're generating space research points. Suppose we should put those to good use, huh? Let's get ourselves some bigger rockets, I think. That would be that's kind of where we are starting to be a little bit sketchy. Just juggling all 4 of these deliveries at once, given that they have to be separate goods in each rocket, is, yeah, it's we're launching pretty quick. The turnaround is pretty quick, so it would be nice if we had a higher capacity rocket, right? This current rocket does 40 per, and the rocket 2 I believe, does 120, or 12 people instead of 4. And it takes titanium and electronics 3 instead of electronics 2. Still requires steel, a little bit more composite panel, but it's really the supplying of the titanium that I think will be the biggest step forward for us for the bigger rockets, but we don't have to provide as many of them. So I think it's a net gain for us. Let's find out. So the way that the space research points work, by the way, is they generate 48 per minute at the level that we're currently at, which gets mixed equally with the 48 lab equipment 4 that we're producing already, right? And that gives us the research that we need. So we can't keep up beyond that yet. Hopefully, we will have higher throughput on the space station research soon. I believe we will need to upgrade even further to get to that. In fact, we do, but we can do it. Let's do it. I think this is the rocket that will take the last chunk up for us to get up to Space Station 4. I've also increased our oxygen storage here so that we can refuel faster. Every bit of turnaround time helps. That should do it. Nope, it's a crew rotation. Never mind. One more rocket. I think this is the one that will finally finish our upgrade.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
Here it comes. Boom. Well, we'll need a little bit more crew before it will operate, so we'll need another crew rocket, but there we go. Do you think we should go to 5? Well, we are currently making at top speed, well, we're boosted now, but that's 6. I think we probably sit here for now. I don't think we can quite keep up. We have to send up everything, right, including the electronics 4 in order to do the research, but we are spending most of our rockets just maintaining now the existing setup that we have. So I think we have to creep through to the end of rocket 2, upgrade our rocket throughput, or build a second one of these, but I think at this point, why not just stay on through? And then that increased sort of rocket throughput capacity will allow us to upgrade even further. So stay the course here for a moment until we are done with the rocket research technology. And there we go. A full 6 means we have our full boost. Let's let them maintain this for a bit, and if we feel confident, we'll upgrade. Otherwise, let's just go ahead and continue researching rocket 2. All right, we are officially struggling to keep up with everything that we need to. I think we have to add a second rocket assembly depot even before we get to rocket 2. Sort of a bummer, but also really not that big a deal at all. So let's just do that real quick. All right, so we officially have 2 launches and 2 assembly depots. So I think what we're gonna do is keep like crew and crew supplies over here, and then maintenance and research stuff over here. Checking back in up here, of course, we do have to re-upgrade, unfortunately, because we deteriorated since we weren't able to supply everything in time, but that's all right. Maybe given the high volumes, maybe we'll supply parts at least on both. Go like that. But only if everything else is satisfied. We are getting to the point where our buffer is enough to keep, 2 separate ones full. So let's do that. All right, well, we upgraded ourselves to a Space Station 5, but I gotta say, this is definitely the edge of our limits here. We are able to keep up actually on the electronics 4, not a problem. Crew, not a problem. Crew supplies is fine. It's the station parts, and actually more than anything, it's the aluminum. We are actually kind of burning through our aluminum here. Now, a good number of these parts, right, were one-time spend to upgrade, 120, whereas we actually only go through 1.3 a minute, right? So we should stabilize here, but we definitely shouldn't push any harder than we already are. That's for sure. We certainly have fine buffers. All of that is fine. The issue really is actually just, are we going to be able to keep up on composite panels to maintain rocket production continuously, right? That's our big aluminum spend. The other thing I did over here, so this fourth aluminum cell, even if the titanium production were running at 100%, which it's not, this would only take 12 of the 24 that it produces, right? So in an ideal world, this would be an overflow, but really doesn't really matter. We should have a metal caster here to be making good use of the full aluminum throughput. I've also changed our priority here so that we are not prioritizing out to sapphire wafers. Just given where we are on electronics 4, we're fine, right? And we've got the lenses still out here, at least a few, but certainly we have the sapphire wafers out here. Maybe we'll boost this just to get it all the way through to lenses, but this is fine. It's just not a huge number. It's just a bigger number than we need it to be, but not by a lot, so no problem there. The other thing we're struggling on a little bit are these silicon wafers. I did add a little bit more production out this way. Probably need to clean this up and do a better version of this in a bit. But the issue is actually it's the silicon poly supply. We're eating it up in order to catch up on our electronics 2, since we're crushing the electronics 3, but also because electronics 2, one of the consumed pieces here for rocket production as well. So we are, I think, at the edge of what we can responsibly handle at this point. We are very much going to appreciate the rocket 2 throughput improvement. Again, these numbers look bigger, but this is 3 times the current cargo capacity. One of those rockets does more than both of these going at once. So that'll be good. We're gonna hang tight on pushing any further until we get all the way through that research. But the good news, actually, now that we are up to that level 5, is that we have the, there we go, space research points in order to run 3 fully moving labs. It's the other reason our electronics 2 and 3 are starting to spend, right, is of course we spend the space research points, but we also spend the lab equipment. We know what that does to our buffers. These are holding up better than you expect, but they won't for forever. There we go, Rocket 2. Very good. Okay, so for Rocket 2s, right, triple throughput, we need not quite triple the composite panels, but some more. We need to add titanium, we need to swap out our electronics 2 for some electronics 3. We'll still need some steel. But this is all straightforward because it's stuff that we have here already. So our composite panels will still feed in the same as they did before. We can actually simplify by removing entirely this electronics 2 supply and just reconnecting to this electronics 3 input. We also bring over the titanium already for our composite cores, so we'll just run a second output along here and connect up to these rocket assembly depots. So I'll do that real quick, and then we should be able to swap over to building Rocket 2s on repeat instead of Rocket 1s. This should hopefully be a very helpful throughput upgrade for our space station. Let's dive in. Okay, so we've got everything hooked up over here, and we are going to stop repeat building these Rocket 1s, but since they're already in motion, and since we're hanging on by a thread on our rocket throughput already, let's let them finish that last one before switching over, and then we will have them build Rocket 2s on repeat. So let's let everything build and catch up here, and we'll check in just a moment. And all right, so that'll be our last rocket one coming out of this rocket assembly depot. We are now asking it to indefinitely create rocket 2s, and the same thing is true over here. So the one concern I have, and I think it'll be okay, but the one concern I have, of course, as always, is going to be our composite panel throughput here. These fellas are boosted, and hopefully they're enough, but we're gonna find out. Of course, the issue, right, is the buffer stock, as always. Now, one of these rockets, once it's decided, okay, it's time to start building, is going to take more than one entire storage unit's worth here. So even if it's just about surge capacity, well, let's keep an eye on it. We might end up having to create separate productions for each of these, and there's an argument to do that anyway, just to sort of simplify and clear this area for the rocket to come out more directly. So let's adjust. But I think, here we go, now that we're talking about rocket 2s, I think we should be making fewer of them, or, needing to make fewer of them. So let's find out. And check that out. That's a rocket 2. It's larger. There goes our last rocket 1. Yep, and that, of course, is our limiter. There goes rocket 2. A full crew rotation. That used to take 2 rockets to rotate our crew of 8. Yeah, so a little while later, as expected but certainly hoped for, we have 2 ready rocket 2s just chilling waiting for a demand, because we don't need to send them as often. They service more at a time. The other part of it, I suppose, is that we aren't actively researching anything, so we don't have to keep up on the electronics 4, but it really does make, it's half as many rockets for rotating the crew. It's a third as many crew supplies rockets. It's a third as many station parts rockets. So this is really, this allows us, I think, to more comfortably upgrade even further if we so desire. The reason to do that, again, it's not for the marginal research efficiency or Unity bonus, it would be to more continuously research or provide space research points, right? This is enough right now to keep up with 3 of our 4 labs continuously. If we go up one more time, we'd be able to do all 4 continuously. And I feel like that's a nice goal, even if, 3 of the 4 is also not the end of the world. It doesn't really change, right? Like if we look at our crew required, that's still 1 rocket. You can rotate the whole crew because it's not more than 12. And it doesn't really change much else for our sort of maintenance requirements. So I think we're going to do it.
5, 3, 2, 1.
And we can immediately upgrade. 1 rocket has everything we need to do the upgrade, and the other is just going to go ahead and, drop off some extra station parts for maintenance. We now have 800% of our maintenance requirements. They must have triggered simultaneously. But the next one will take crew, no problem, and another for crew supplies. So, very good. Those 2 rockets are immediately ready, and we are, so it'll be the composite that takes a second to catch up here, but that should certainly, they should both be ready by the next time that they are requested. So, very good, we'll take it. The one thing that we are still, I don't want to say if we're struggling on, it's definitely been a lot of one-time expenditures, but the aluminum that we've got going on over here is not, it's a minor source of stress. Like we're enough is coming out. Like we're okay, right? If you look over here, we still have what's needed. This is never empty, but it's not exactly comfortable or full either. The only other place we make aluminum, right, is out here, for the very small amount that we recycle. We only get that because we are providing consumer electronics, although, not super continuously if we don't have aluminum here. So we'll hope that it catches up a little bit. The system is not boostable, unfortunately, right? Because these aluminum cells are not boostable, and so therefore if the entire chain isn't boostable, none of it's boostable. But I think it should catch up. Again, it was a lot of one-time expenditures, and I've been kind of babysitting this setup to make sure that it is running smoothly. The one piece here is the acid has to be trucked in, but that's only to handle the waste over here in the settling tanks. So we're doing okay, even though, my goodness, we're going through the brine. We will make sure that this ends up being enough throughput. I think it's fine. I think it's fine, but let's see. Yeah, I mean, red is consistently higher than green, although we've bumped green back up here a little bit and red's come back down, so we're going to keep an eye on it for sure. Okay, checking in a little while later, we are definitely catching up, as predicted. So we're sitting here with a spare rocket, 2 on the platform. We have everything we need from a rocket perspective. We are keeping up on the composite panels, but usually only if I boost these, although we certainly have the aluminum to do it. So as a result of that bottleneck on throughput for generating the panels, I decided to move that production over here. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other as far as transporting the aluminum from here to here, or just the composite panels from here to here. And it's not really that much further or less far. It's basically a wash from the perspective of, taking the plastic and steel across town too. So I figured this is obviously more machines, but it's also going to simplify over here. We can, reuse this space for additional space-specific production as well. We'll have to keep the steel, right? Because steel still goes through to the rockets, but I believe that's the only place we're using plastic. So these machines and then these 2 storages can come off the board. This one will be moved into one of their places, but it will, I think, simplify this area and take back a bit of space in addition to solving our throughput. So let's check back in a second. Once that's all spun up, we can spin this down and I'll show off the newly reclaimed space. Okay, a little while later, we are all cleaned up and all caught up. So I actually just made separate storages to feed into each of these rocket assembly depots. It was mainly to cut down on travel time because we needed to clear this opening or this rocket was always going to go a little bit the long way around, which is not really the end of the world except for how slow these little transports are. It was driving me personally nuts, even if it wasn't really that impactful. But we'll take any little improvement we can get here, particularly given how close we are to the edge of the knife on aluminum. We are actually okay. Like, we make a small but confident surplus here now. So we still needed, I forgot this, before the cut, but we still need aluminum out here for 2 other things, right? The fuel and the solar panels, right? So it's not a lot, but it's still some. So we charged that buffer back up, and of course had to charge up the composite panel buffers on each of these 2 storages here, plus the output. But we're starting to finally back up in a meaningful way. That's an extra 1,000 aluminum at the main output storage. So it has meant that I'm continually boosting this westernmost quarter of our aluminum plant, simply because we don't have to do this except for if we want literally any overflow at all to come out here to the crystallizer for the sapphire wafers, which we do. So it's overkill, but also we still want it. I bet, for example, we probably don't actually need to be boosting both of these settling tanks, but 0.25 just to be sure and not have to think about it. We are at that point in the game. So I think we feel pretty good about this. We have our rockets very comfortably set up. We have our fully supplied space station, and every once in a while it catches enough station parts for a decade in a single rocket. So we're in a nice stable place here. I think we have caught our breath, which means it is time to continue researching. Let's actually make use of those space research points. Now, two last final big directions we can go here, right? We haven't talked about this in too much detail yet, but the space probe and then the asteroid boosters technologies are required for I would say the last main purpose of the space station in this game, which is to find and corral asteroids out in space that you can then blast down onto the map and land somewhere on your island, and they are full of various ores. The idea here being that you have an alternative way to keep mining relevant through the very end of the game. Even if you've dug up everything that's on your island, you can just drop asteroids and mine from that. That's kind of neat. In practice, I don't know how compelling it is when we have contracts, right? Contracts are just better. They're infinitely renewable as well, and they don't cost anywhere near the investment we've made in our space program. But it's kind of fun, and wouldn't it be nice just to at least land one, just to try it out and show it off? So we will do that. In order to do that, though, these space probe parts are required. Composite cores, no problem, we make them. Electronics 4, no problem, we make them. Plutonium, we do make some of this, right? We currently use it to make MOX rods. This comes from reprocessing our spent fuel. But these are things that, okay, we make in small quantities. Maybe we would want to reinforce them depending on how many of these we need. But we need to make these space probe parts. That's the first thing we need to research. The next is these asteroid boosters. Again, similarly, things we already make, although this is technically new. It's made in one of the same buildings, right, that we already use, the enrichment plant. So instead of making fuel, we simply make even more enriched uranium. Okay, so that's possible. And then we use that to make this compact reactor, which we mix with even more composite cores and some diamonds to make asteroid booster parts. Okay, so that's one of the two remaining directions left in the game for us. Two is the Fast Breeder Reactor. This is the final upgrade to the nuclear power technologies that we have, and it looks complicated, and I'm not going to walk through it in detail quite yet, but there's a couple quick takeaways. One, we can finally process that spent MOX and turn it into something else that we need. And two, there's this blanket fuel recycling loop that is extremely powerful for reasons we'll get to when we get into that explanation. But it will produce as byproduct the exact same things that we were just saying, well, we can make them, but it's a bit of a stretch for us to make in quantities. So realistically, the quote-unquote correct way to do this is to go through the fast breeder technology research first, and then implement that technology and the extra power that we will certainly be happy to have, and use that and those byproducts to then fuel our space program advancement. And I think that's probably what we'll do. There's also something kind of fun and final about slamming an asteroid into the ground and calling it a playthrough. So I think that's how we're going to sequence things. So let's go here and here. And then, of course, we will need to actually turn our labs back on. Non-zero chance this gets a little stuttery. I don't know that we'll be able to maintain this continually all the way through all three of those technologies, but that will be... We can't really... We shouldn't bother with anything until we get through those, at least through the fast breeder technology, which I think we will probably save for the next episode. So, I'm going to probably call it here for an episode, so that we can focus on that fast breeder technology next time, start to finish. Just a little bit late to start a brand new build that is as complicated as messing around with nuclear. So we'll leave that go for now, but we'll research it between now and next episode, of course. So, all that to say, I think that's where we're going to leave it today, but certainly a good one here in the sense of we've really pushed through our space program much further. We are right across, ready to cross the finish line. We are in fact all jammed up on space research points. We have to get spending them, which is what we're doing. And, you know, it's been a minute since we were able to fully run, right? One of these, all 4 of these Research Lab 4s. So it's actually kind of cool that we're at that place finally again. So even as I'm riffing and rambling, right, we're approaching 10% here. It does feel pretty nice to have that boost as well. And hey, you know what? I've been ripping on these bonuses the entire time, but you know what? This 35% does not hurt right now. Does not hurt at all. So we are excited, we are ready for the next phase, and we are as scientifically upgraded as you can be in this game. We got fully maxed out space research points. Pretty fun little milestone here for us. So next time, Fast Breeder Reactor, and then following that, it'll be time to drop some asteroids and call it a game from there. So very close to the finish line. Thanks as always for joining. I certainly had a good time, and I hope that you did too. If you did, of course, be sure to drop by again for the next one. And yeah, see the Fast Breeder Reactor. It's I think it's one of the cooler final milestones in this game, or really in any. It's a pretty neat one. So be sure to tune in for that. But until then, have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.